Welcome, everyone. This is Michelle Lee with Athena Rising Now, Women's Empowerment Coach, with a small interview series with men. As you know, we've been talking about the healing between Adam and Eve, the healing between the masculine and the feminine, and this is really new to me. I've been working with women for 16 years and empowering them. I didn't realize what piece I was missing. And so I am so delighted and so honored here to introduce you to Michael Parise. He is a life and spirit coach, and he has so much wisdom to offer on the divine masculine, the healthy masculine, and how we can lift up our men into their enlightenment and well-being. Thank you, Michael, for being here. Would you share a little bit more about what you do?
Thank you, Michelle. As you said, a life coach, and I'm a spiritual director also. I work with individuals and with groups. I do workshops and talks. I basically try to empower executives and professionals to move through changes and stresses in their life so they can be more productive and happy people.
I love that. I love that. That's, such a missing piece is happiness. We want to be happy. We have been given like this blueprint of success, which has really nothing to do with who we are as spiritual beings. So you and I had a chat last week, and I'm in awe of your wisdom. I'm in awe of, what you're doing in the world. And so I would love just to invite you to share with us, as I was saying, I've been working with empowering women for 16 years and really considered myself to be an empowered woman, but I hadn't made peace with men. And that's really been coming up for me. I mean, we're on this fast track to awakening, and women are stepping into their power. And what I found is that men aren't sure what their role is anymore. So, what do you have to speak on that, and how do we support the men in our lives?
Well, boys and men in general, and I'm discovering this to be still true. I thought it was less true 5 years ago, 3 years ago. I think it's still true in most of America. Men are empowered in a very narrow way. They're not offered the fullest range of what it means to be masculine, what it means to embrace their femininity, and what it means to allow themselves to break out of the stereotypes in which they're locked. Unfortunately, male development is so different from female development, and most of the people who are raising boys today are women who don't understand all of those pieces. Some do, but especially in schools where they expect boys to sit down and behave. Well, boys can't always sit down and behave because their body doesn't allow them to. And as a result, they are very often pegged as being irresponsible or unruly. Whereas the quieter boys who do sit down and behave are given more attention and also more teaching, very often. And they're more educable in some ways, at least in the style that women are comfortable in educating. So we have the whole idea of teaching. We have the idea of clergy who are usually tapped into their feminine side, whether they're male or female. We have a lot of single mothers who are courageously raising their kids, very often without the help of a full-time or even a part-time dad around. So we have all those factors that have entered into the picture, not to mention the fact that our country seems to be in the business of creating veterans of wars.
Exactly.
So, as we continually push war upon our people as being the answer to or the solution to some problems in the world, young men some of them are going in that direction, feeling as if they're not real men unless they are able to participate in some form of conflict. It may not be war or the service, but it might be something closer to home, like gangs and other kinds of manifestations.
Right, right. So I see all of that. I have been a single mom. I have raised two boys on my own. My older one's 22. My youngest is the only one I have at home now. He's 15. And so, you know, with my youngest, I've been more awake and aware of the feminine, right? So I can say, you know, that's not okay behavior when it comes to how you treat women and girls. But I've been at a loss, quite honestly, of saying what is okay behavior. Who are you as a man? Who should, you know? And he has even expressed to me, you know, I don't have a male figure, and so it's been a real loss. So what do our boys and what do our men need from us, from our communities, from our culture, to really step into a healthy masculine? And what is a healthy masculine?
One nationwide and maybe even worldwide movement is called the Mankind Project, and it is basically men mentoring younger men. And I'm not personally involved in it, except I have listened to and read a lot about it through Facebook posts and others who are doing this. So there's that angle. There are also the scouts that can be really great opportunities for boys to be connected with men. But, you know, on a more practical level, though, you know, you're asking me, how can women help boys become balanced men? Because that's really where it's at. And we also need men to understand they have a job to do in this area, too. And many of them do a wonderful job. Yeah. I've met many great mentors of their sons and of the boys in the neighborhood. So it gets complicated because the young boys today are taught to pursue. They're taught that there's some sort of one must win the girl. One must pursue the girl and capture the girl. This is in all the films that were up until the 70s, maybe, that were out there. Just a whole lot of the stereotype where the way boys relate to girls is to dominate them in some way. Now, fortunately, a lot of that's changed in the media. So what do boys do? I think the women of our country and the women you serve already have the answer. I think they do. It's get into their heart. Boys have hearts, and boys need to identify how to listen to their hearts. So that is the key for boys and girls. I don't think there needs to be a huge gender identity or gender difference in raising kids, as long as we're focused on their hearts. Their hearts are really where their soul is, the core identity of who they are. And so someone like Joseph Campbell will talk about the heart, talk about the soul. So we want to get to where that individual boy finds awe and wonder, joy, adventure, and happiness in themselves. And they need to define it. They have a right to define it, as well as the girls. They all have the right to define it. This is why we're finding so many young women who are finally branching out into every possible field there is, including the Scouts. You know, they're starting to amalgamate because of a lack of numbers in the Boy Scouts, and the girls wanting to do what the boys do and learn about all those skills. Great, they're starting to amalgamate. We see this in the military as well. Getting to the heart of who a child is. So every child is going to be different, right? And you're going to have one who is the super macho type who loves sports and loves to compete and loves to get into the win-loss kind of thing. And then you're going to have this very sensitive kid who's going to want to play music and do art, or something in between, or a combination of the two. But when the child is able to listen to their hearts, they can define it. It does change with time. This is the other thing that kids need to learn from their parents, that just because they have their heart set on something at the age of 8 or 10 or 12, it may change at 14 and 16. It may change again at 20, 25. And we're really allowing our young men nowadays to stay home a lot longer, and our young women for a lot of reasons, economic as well as social. So they're maturing later. So that it's quite possible that what they went to college for and even went to graduate school for is not what they are ending up doing. They discovered something else altogether different.
Right, right. I love that. So allowing them to go to follow their hearts and cultivating that. So how do we cultivate that? Imagine now, I'm speaking to women who are in their 40s, 50s. They've lived their life with their husband one way. They've basically taken care of the home. The man has been, over the finances, the income, and now she wants to change things up a little bit. And here's her struggle, her obstacle in front of her is one. She's afraid that she doesn't get to do that because suddenly she's changing the rules, right? And then there's also the fear of her husband judging her or thinking she's dumb or not believing in her. So, which I know is a reflection of her own self-doubt as well. But what do we do as women, as wives, to encourage our husbands and help them to feel safe in the game change?
That's a great question. There are 3 things I just wrote down to kind of prompt me because they're really important. First thing is quiet time. If we're going to get our young people used to listening to their hearts, to grow up to be the kind of men who can listen to their hearts, and women too, they need to have quiet time. They need to get away from media. They need to get away from phones. They need time to be bored and discover what it means to be alone and with themselves. Mm-hmm. So this is a problem for both men and women, I realize. But when women are saying that they can't get their men's attention on certain areas, it could very well be that the guy is tired and just wants to zone out with distraction, whatever that distraction is. So quiet time needs to be fostered. And in marriage, it needs to be fostered. There needs to be time where the couple in the early years of their life can actually just sit quietly together and do nothing. Watch no television, not be on their phones, and kind of discuss this before they get married. Like, we really need to foster something that's going to nurture our souls. Now, say people go to church or a synagogue. That's great. But I find churches and synagogues just as noisy as media. Mm-hmm. They really don't have a whole lot of time that's quiet and private sometimes. Right. Then you say, well, how do we get to this point? Well, the second point is communication, as you know. Really fostering the soul kinds of communication on a regular basis and affirming the way in which your partner or lover or spouse touches your heart, speaking it out loud and really saying, you know what, I just want you to know how I have changed because of you, or what you have done for me, or how you touch my heart in a way that nobody else has. And they need to hear that. You need to hear it as a woman as well. They need to be sometimes taught how to do it, and so they can then know, oh, this is the language I can use with her. No, I'm a gay man. I haven't been married more than 3 years, and I'm married to a man. So it's a little different for me, but I do use the same technique. And I have found in my own relationship that it is possible to model a kind of communication and insist on that modeling for yourself, and the other person begins picking up on it. Just very subtle little ways. And I've been amazed. It's been working.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And the third thing is being single-minded, having a purpose. What is your purpose in life? What is your ultimate purpose in life? So that before you try to get this change to take place in your life with your husband on board, or your lover or your partner on board, the question really is, what is my life purpose? And have you been talking about that? Have you shared that with that person? That you really come to realize that right now my life purpose is X. Now, beforehand, my life purpose was to have children and raise them. But my life purpose has changed. That gives him permission to change his life purpose if necessary as well. But also to hear the language, once again, of life purpose, the reason I exist in this moment. And that would be the fourth thing I would suggest, besides quiet time, communication, being single-minded about your life purpose. The fourth thing is living in the now, living right today, not in the past with the hurts that were there. And it's so easy in relationships to presume something, that our partner is going to react a certain way because of previous experiences. Maybe that's a bad presumption. So we need to go forward, live in this moment today, and really approach the person. And perhaps maybe there's the fifth thing would be touch. When you're having that kind of conversation, to be sitting close by and possibly even holding or touching their hand or arm. That touch creates an energy field that is spiritual, and that is, it's almost, in fact, someone once told me, if you're ever in an argument with your spouse and you really want to get it through it, hold hands through the argument. Yes, you could yell, cry, scream at each other, swear, do whatever you want, but hold hands while you're doing it, and you're going to discover a completely different outcome.
Wow, I love that. Such a simple tool.
Yeah.
Such a simple tool. So, you know, when we spoke before, you had shared with me ways that men deal with their emotions. And I would like you to kind of speak into that a little bit, because the sacred feminine has been denied in both men and women. You know, men have been robbed from being able to feel, express, experience all of their emotions. And so they react, you know, anger is the only emotion that seems to be acceptable for men and boys. And so in what ways do you see men acting out when they don't get full expression of their emotional spectrum?
Well, that's a great, wonderful question, because it's so obvious too. The anger piece is sometimes hiding depression. The anger piece can also be inherited, I believe. In other words, families of origin, going back generations, if anger was the go-to emotion, then it just continues to go that way unless you put a stop to it.
Sure.
We see this in minority communities very often, especially in the African American community. People will say, well, why are they angry? Why are these men so angry? Well, good heavens, look at their history. There is something that gets ingrained almost genetically in people's lives when they've been enslaved and abused, so that women, I'm amazed that they're not expressing even more anger. Women seem to be able, and this is a mystery to me, but women seem to be able to channel their anger to a lot of different areas. They are that's where the multitasking, I think, is much more validly put. Not so much on things to do. It's on the emotional apportionment of one's energies. And so if a woman is angry, I have found that, yes, they could express that anger in a very violent, necessary, nasty way, but they can also channel it to do something about it and to really move in a new direction because of it, and to gather together a community of people who are going to be like-minded. This is why so many social movements today are run by and pushed through by women. Men have a harder time with this. Men will, my experience, this is my very limited experience, men will very often militarize their efforts. So we see unions, we see revolutions over the centuries, we see all sorts of things where men got together to do something about tyranny or to do something about injustice. And they militarized it. They used military language sometimes, but they sometimes used even something that would be almost akin to violence. I mean, if you ever try to cross a picket line, you know that's not something you really want to do from a physical point of view. Whereas women, look at the women's suffrage movement, they were force-fed in prison with tubes down their throats when they tried to fast from eating in order to make their point. They were abused, and yet, generally speaking, not 100%, they kept to a peaceful, nonviolent demonstration, something that Martin Luther King taught us in the 60s, and which we really need to pick up on again.
Right.
So men, I find in their frustration to be heard, will very often turn to anger, turn to sometimes to violence, but turn to an emotional kind of edge whereby they either retreat completely from socializing with others who can help them get their goal, or they gather together in a gang kind of situation that is based in anger and not in rationality. Again, these are simplistic answers. So I recognize that. But in general, you see this in the well, I used to see it, let's put it this way, in the schoolyard.
Mm-hmm.
Where there was the classic bullies and the classic jocks and the rest of us, and the rest of us had to watch out because we would be put upon by the others who ganged up.
Right, right. So here's where I want to take this is, you did previously when we spoke, you spoke of, men channeling their anger in a certain way, and when they feel powerless, channeling in a certain way. There could be pornography, prostitution, cheating, being faithful. And so here's what I would like you to clarify is that when men feel disempowered, it is their loss of their false power, right? And so that can kind of that often bubbles up as women step into their power, authentic power. We're talking authentic empowerment here.
Yes, yes.
And so that scares a lot of women, that she cannot step up into her power without emasculating her partner or her husband. So how do we support our men in really stepping into authentic power, recognizing that what they thought was power has only been, a house of cards, really?
Well, every instance, of course, is individual.
Sure.
But when women step into their authentic power, their men, I would want their men to be cheering them on, right?
Right.
When a man isn't cheering on the women, it's the man's issue, not the woman. So that's number one. The woman needs to not take on that as her issue. And I think probably it's not one where she can directly address it either. John, you're not empowering me. Or John, why are you feeling insecure?
Right.
She needs to have an understanding of what's going on in his life and at work. And that requires a lot of asking of questions along the way. What is work like for you? Who is the guy or the woman whom you really love working with? what's that like? What about the person you don't like working with? What's that like? A man, for example, who loses a job or loses a position or doesn't get further ahead, especially by the time he's in his 50s, very often feels the same emotionally as a woman who has a hard time getting pregnant or who has had a miscarriage. It's that level of emotional depth that the man doesn't know how to handle.
Right.
And it's the same thing 25, 35 years ago when women had a miscarriage or couldn't have children. You can quote me all the garbage that was told of them. Oh, well, you can always try again, or don't worry, God has a plan, or some sort of simplistic kind of thing. Well, the same simplistic kinds of things are happening to men today when these situations in employment especially take place, or situations where they are physically changing and they aren't what they used to be. And the amount of erectile dysfunction among men due to medications, due to smoking, diabetes, and emotional issues is huge. And it's not something that a Viagra pill cures, except for the physical part, but in the emotional part doesn't get cured.
Right.
So what is the man going through? Because there's such a thing as male menopause, but it's much more complicated than that, because we don't understand female menopause and what women go through. And I don't think we understand male changes of life and changes of physicality and the decrease in testosterone year after year after year, so that 1% a year adds up.
Right.
So that your energy level, your ability to be who you used to be isn't there. All of that needs to be discussed at the dinner table, in the bed, anywhere possible. Someone's got to bring it up in a gentle and respectful way for the two people to really understand each other. Because what you're proposing is a deep understanding of one another in order to help one another make these adjustments. That deep understanding takes a lot of effort and time.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but sometimes it takes patience in terms of years before the other person catches up, because they just aren't there yet.
Right. Right. Well, I think, to sum it up, of what I really hear you saying is that men need to be heard and acknowledged for what's going on in their lives. And I think that has been a real missing piece. It's been, hey, you support us. That is your male role. You need to support us. And when you're not doing that, then you're not being manly. And so that's a lot of pressure. And if they've done that really well, and then the wife comes in and wants to change things around and wants to maybe invest in herself and do that, it does feel personal, I'm sure. Right. And then, and if that was their sense of power, then they're going to find other ways to feel empowered. So I love all that you have said. And like you said, it's deep communication. And I see with a lot of women, a lot of my own clients, that communication has not been fostered throughout the marriage, because they're each hiding, right? Both men and women are hiding. So you are just a wealth of information. And Michael, we're going to have to close for now. I mean, that 30 minutes flew by.
It sure did.
I know. But how can everyone find you?
Well, the best way to find me is my website, where I have my blog, my Take Charge blog. The website is Parise, Parise, lifecoach.com. And you can reach me on email just with my name, Michael Parise, Parise, all one word, at gmail.com. And those are the two best places to reach me and to even continue the conversation. And I just skirted on a few tiny little things. There's so much more that we could talk about. But I love what you're doing, Michelle. I love that you're moving in this direction, not just because the thing is everyone's going to benefit.
Yes.
All will benefit, and ultimately we'll have the kind of gender equality we're really looking for.
Yes, heartfelt gender equality where everybody gets to be whole.
Exactly. Yes.
Everybody gets to be whole.
Yeah.
I guess. Thank you so much, Michael. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And like you said, I know you just scratched the surface. So all of you watching out there, check out Michael. His link is in the email that you received this with. So go check him out, see what he's doing. He's also a fantastic artist. So bye for now. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.